to present James Bond.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thank you so much. How is everyone doing today? Good. I've talked to most of you already. It's really good to be here. This is like a sort of an interesting experience for me because I am in high school, and you'll hear more about that in a little bit here. But this has been awesome. This has been an awesome day. I drove from Syracuse. Been staying with my sister for the past day, and I really like to thank you for choosing to come and talk and hear me speak today. This is Lessons Learned from Organizing a Coding Bootcamp. So kind of a self-explanatory title, but really in this presentation, you're going to learn a lot about me, as well as a really special community back home and one here. And you're going to hopefully laugh, and you're going to hopefully learn something in the end. So let's get started. So before I do start, I just wanted to say thank you to Linda and the DevFest team. This has been just like it's been a great experience. Being able to put on this whole day event, another day, the speaker dinner afterwards. I mean, Jesse and I know firsthand how much work this takes, and it's just great to see you guys here. So thank you so much for having me. So who am I? I am actually, like I said, a current senior at James Wood High School in Syracuse, New York. And is anyone here from Syracuse? I know you guys here, yeah. Nice, okay. I'll discuss that in a moment, but more importantly, like Linda said, I'm a operations intern at Hack Upstate. So what does this mean? Because the title seems kind of vague, and what I tell people is that I wear multiple hats. So really anything from client outreach to talking with our students to a little graphic design or video editing, and yes, sometimes getting coffee. There's a really funny photo of me lugging a giant urn of coffee at Hack Upstate, which I have like pinned on my clipboard. And I'll introduce both those programs later. But outside of work and school, I'm also a tennis player. I've really grown to love the sport. Both my dad and my grandfather did it. I'm also a student pilot. I have over 45 hours in the air. And part of the reason I actually got this job was to pay for that endeavor, because it's obviously expensive. But funny enough, I really got into this, and I've loved every second of it. It's been great, sort of another thing that I really enjoyed doing. But finally, I'm a technologist, and I'm really, really into like engineering, building with my hands. It's what I want to study later on in school. And the common theme is that like complex problem solving, right? So I really love energizing folks to do stuff like that, and building a community has been awesome. And this is really what the presentation is about. So like I said, yes, I actually am in high school. I get asked this a lot because of three things. One, my height, which kind of makes me look like I'm not in high school. I've definitely been offered alcohol at restaurants and asked if I was in college multiple times. The second thing being my position, being an intern. When I first applied for this, I was really like skeptical of myself, well, mainly because Jesse and Doug advertised it as a position for like graduate and undergraduate level students in college. So, you know, especially over something like the phone or like a long email chain, when people realize I'm in high school, it's kind of like always interesting to see the reaction. And the third thing is my sometimes annoying like professionalism and maturity. I definitely get made fun of for this by my friends a lot. They're like, you sound like an adult when you're talking. So I find that funny. But the way I see it at the bottom line is that, especially after managed teams and working with a lot of people who are older than me, the bottom line is that a job well done isn't necessarily contingent on credentials or specific qualifications. So more so as a young person who's trying to spread this message, and often I'm working with young people, especially at an event like Hack Upstate, this is a really important message that I'm trying to broadcast to them. To young people and others in the situation, the thing I say to them is, push yourself to do things you don't think you'll be able to do. You never know what's going to happen. I certainly can tell you that a year ago, I would not be standing in this position talking to you guys today about this thing that I did that was not meant for high schoolers. So it's just kind of been an interesting experience, but it's made me definitely a better person as a result. And as someone who wants to build in this idea, and really anyone who's young or maybe a little older, is to network, especially at an event like this. I mean, I've already met some really awesome people, and I'm sure all of you have today, but you really never know what that's gonna take you. I remember I met Jesse at an open hack like 3 years ago, and we were like talking about Cheetos or something. And like next thing you know, he's my boss. So really, you know that's gonna happen. So to kind of get into the roots of this talk, I wanted to talk about Hack Upstate first. So the mission of Hack Upstate, like you might have heard Jesse talk about in today's opening remarks, is to advance upstate New York's technology community and to generate and keep technologists within the region. So this is the company started in 2013 by Doug Crescenzi to solve two sort of main problems. One being that we want to keep talent from local universities here in Central New York. I know the Tech Loop company that spoke back in the opening remarks had a very similar sort of pitch. I thought that was kind of cool. We have the same problem in Syracuse. Oftentimes folks come to schools like SU and University of Rochester and Oswego, the list goes on. They get these amazing world-class educations and then they leave. They go to get tech jobs or engineering jobs in other parts of the country, especially in New York City and Silicon Valley. So it's really hard to keep that sort of economic loop going when they can't come back and contribute to the industry. And ultimately, as a result of this, we really work to help align folks with employment opportunities in Central New York. We want to keep them here. And over the past few years, we've been able to align folks with dozens of employment opportunities, and especially someone who joined the team recently, it's really cool to be able to say that. And the second problem is to help increase cross-collaboration between the sort of silos of New York. So Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany. I think us being here today, having almost half the room be from Syracuse is a really cool testament to that. And Hack Upstate allows us to do all these things, keep all these amazing engineers and technologists together to fuel this cross-collaboration by doing hackathons. So we host 2 hackathons a year, one in April and one in October, which is actually next weekend, October 5th and 6th, if you can make it, in Syracuse. And this allows us to keep these people together. We all code, we hack together, increase collaboration. We have a lot of partners who come out, align those employment opportunities, et cetera. And at the end of the day, this has created a really awesome network of folks, thousands of technologists over the past 6 years. And our Slack has like 600 or 700 people in it, which is just awesome. So before I get into talk about careers in code, which is the main reason why I'm talking today, who has heard of a coding bootcamp before? I realize it's probably most of this room. Awesome. Okay, so I know Albany Can Code, recently talked today, and they were kind of prominent around this area. Careers in Code is hoping to build in the Syracuse area, if you've heard of like Start Fast or something like that. So when we talk about coding boot camps, like realistically, what is a coding boot camp when you think about it? So I'm going to actually read off of here. It's the only time I'm going to do this. So a coding boot camp is a technical training program that teaches the programming skills that employers look for. Coding boot camps enable students with little coding proficiency to focus on the most important aspects of coding and immediately apply their new coding skills to solve real world problems. And like I said, I promise it's the only time I'm going to read off the screen. It just makes me crazy. But I like this definition because it reminds us that boot camps really have one goal, and that's to prepare students for the workforce and give them the best chance of getting a job. And I think all the students sitting here, you can attest to that. That's the end goal, right? That's what you're hoping to do. And while Careers in Code does subscribe to that model because we are a boot camp, our specific mission with this economic revitalization piece that you're going to hear about in a second has allowed us to deviate from this specific model. And that brings me to the first big part of this presentation, which is our problem. And the main problem is that poverty throughout Central New York is rising at an accelerated rate, and it's really stifling our economic opportunity and potential within Syracuse, especially within areas like the city or those adjacent if you're familiar with the area. To kind of put that into context, Syracuse was ranked one of the top 10 most impoverished cities in the country I think it was last year. So basically, roughly 1 in 3 people within the city live at or below the poverty line. And sure, those numbers are quite similar throughout the Central New York and upstate New York region. Cities like Albany and Rochester probably have the same problems. In particular, there are few opportunities for women and minority groups to advance in concentrated areas of extreme poverty. Equal access to educational, employment, and opportunities are simply not available to them because of their situation, whether they were born into it or otherwise. And at the same time, when you look at the patterns, the proof is there that Central New York employers are facing a very similar problem. They're struggling to hire this local talent. Software developers are critical to the growth. Almost every single company today, they're a tech company, whether they like it or not. And at this time in our regional talent pool really just isn't big enough to fill their hiring needs. So when we talk about the mission of Hack Upstate, that's where all that starts to fold in. And consequently, employers who want to hire locally, who can't, sometimes are forced to outsource their employment. So again, they're not really contributing to the industry when they go to hire a bunch of remote developers in California. And as these problems emerged, we noticed that pattern between high poverty and increasing demand for employers, a solution was born. And that solution really kind of revolves around 2 things. One being Onondaga County, and the other being the Alliance for Economic Inclusion. So for more context, basically $500 million was put into something called the Upstate Revitalization Initiative. And an additional $30 million was siphoned off to the Alliance for Economic Inclusion, which is based in Syracuse, to actually fight poverty within areas like Syracuse. And as a company, as Hack Upstate, we saw this as an opportunity to help solve these two problems. They opened the request for proposals, we submitted an application, and back in the beginning of the year, we received the money to fund a boot camp. We were extremely fortunate to have received this grant. When you look at other boot camp models, oftentimes graduates are forced to pay, and they're forced to do a lot of other things that may increase barriers for them. And I'm gonna talk about that in a couple seconds, but the fact that we were able to get this really just shaped the whole premise of Careers in Code as a whole. And like I said, eventually Careers in Code was born from this premise. So now, what is Careers in Code? I'm sure you're all asking. We basically saw a problem. The money and the infrastructure existed to solve that problem. So we took it upon ourselves to create this opportunity for folks. Being funded publicly, like I said, we work to minimize barriers in an effort to cast the widest net when looking for applicants. So as a result of all this, we were able to provide a lot of key things like free tuition. So nobody had to pay out of pocket for this. They were all funded by the grant. Every single student received a free 2018 MacBook Pro that they kept contingent upon graduation. I know some of you have them in your backpacks. All students had the option to receive a free CoWorks membership. So if they didn't have an environment at home or maybe at work where they could code efficiently and safely, they could go to a space like Syracuse CoWorks and do that. Each student also received $500, which is crazy, to actually go out and spend money on things that they thought could help, increase their quality of life as a student. So a lot of people spent them on things like laptop covers or anything like that, to a course on how to learn React. So that was a really cool resource that we saw our students utilize in many different ways. And we also had created this sort of like special role that was part of Careers in Code called the Student Success Representative. And this individual, Jason Scharf, it's actually a caseworker within the city. So he works with students, and other people in similar situations. He was the one who was dedicated to the success of our students. So when we saw them go through problems, we had somebody dedicated on our team to actually solve that. And we thought that adding the Student Success Representative really, again, set us apart from other coding boot camps. And as a result of all this, graduation for our students was contingent on the fact that they resided in Central New York for 2 years to help boost our local economy. So going back to the mission of Hack Upstate about how all these graduates were leaving, we want to make sure that these folks are actually staying. And again, they want to pay back the community that has given the students so much. So this, in addition to the Alliance for Economic Inclusion and the Onondaga County, really wouldn't have been possible without our partners. They provided some really excellent tools for us to kind of facilitate this program even further. Companies like TCG Player provided us with some really awesome guest speakers from anything from their, customer fulfillment departments to, software development and so on. We had a couple folks come in from Raymore and Flanagan to basically take hours out of their really busy schedule and conduct individual mock interviews with all of our students, which is just fantastic. Getting them that hands-on experience they would again use after graduation was great. And then, places like the CoWorks who were providing, we were partnering with them to provide memberships for our students, which was also fantastic. So, as we got all these things in order, finally cohort 1, the journey begins for them. The process of screening applicants and looking for our students began in early January of this year. And as the program would be extended over 24 weeks, we wanted to create an extensive and comprehensive application process that, again, would cast that widest net as possible to attract the most folks. So at the end, we landed on around the 28% acceptance rate. We accepted 12 students into the program. But the interview process and the sort of, technical interview process, I guess you could say, consisted of about 8 to 10 hours of prep work, which included some activities surrounding introductions to code and how things work, like namely using sites like Code Academy, and then they were later quizzed on these things. And this acted both as a way for us to see how they retain the information, as well as for them to see if this program was the right fit for them, just like any other job interview, or maybe if you're going to see college for the first time. In addition to that, they also had a 2 to 3 hour take-home technical interview looking at Syracuse data sets. So again, looking at that technical piece, we want to see how they look at things, notice patterns, that sort of stuff. And then being as a really big task, there were a lot of questions associated with this. It provided us with some really insightful data later on in the admissions process. And to sort of touch on this accessibility process, and like the slide says, we met all of our students on March 7th. All this was conducted remotely. So we wanted to make sure that, again, minimizing barriers, our students wouldn't necessarily be hindered if they couldn't get to somewhere for an interview because of lack of transportation or otherwise. So by doing it remotely, we thought we were casting the widest net, and we certainly did. So, like I said, we landed in that 28% acceptance rate. And things that we noticed about these students is they, from the get-go, had insane amounts of passion, aptitude, and grit. They were some of the most passionate, driven individuals that I had ever worked with and seen, really, even from only working with them for a few days. They would prove to have insane amount of grit, both getting through the tough times, whether that be debugging code or having family issues, and also to celebrate the good ones when their code finally worked or when they finished their capstone project. Those were really cool moments to see them go through. And the proof of this is that a lot of our students, if not all of them, had full-time jobs outside of the industry. So they would go and they would work, and then they would come to class and learn with us from 5:30 to 8:30, 4 times a week. So they were incredibly busy. Oftentimes we'd walk into class trying to see their fit their naps in beforehand because they were so tired. Kind of a testament. They were working hard, and we really tried to notice that. But more importantly, they were ready to take the plunge with us. They knew that this was an adventure for us as much as it was for them, and we were ready to learn with them. And that really created a cool partnership rather than them being the students and us being the teachers. So here they are, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not really sure what they got themselves into, but excited nonetheless. These are photos from their first class on March 11, 2019 at the Tech Garden, which is in downtown Syracuse, where all the classes were held. This is a really exciting moment for us as well, kind of having seen them go through this admissions process and see them get to where they are today. It was really cool to see all of our work finally going to fruition. And some more photos here, they said. Yeah, a lot of good ones. And so now that I've kind of talked about that and talked about all the stuff that went into the program itself, I want to get to the roots of this, which is boot camps from the organizer's perspective. So you saw our students, you learned about the program, and you kind of learned about me and what everything kind of entailed. But the title of the talk is Lessons Learned. So I'm going to get into that now. So going into the program, we had a lot of planning and excitement. We had a lot of planning to do. We also had a lot of excitement. I was fortunate enough to be hired in late January, and I remember the excitement that was in the air as we started to plan immediately for cohort 1. I remember the first week, I was equally as busy as Jesse and Doug, and we were all doing different things to try to get ready for that March start date. And that excitement has only been boosted seeing them graduate. I really can't wait to see what all you guys do afterwards, and it's kind of cool to see you go from beginning in that admissions process to now having graduated. It seems like there was so much to do in so little time, but we kept on pushing through deadlines and barriers. And this can be sort of a common theme to boot camps, and especially with those having a small team like us. Really, it was only the 3 of us, me, Jesse, and Doug, and we had our student success representative kind of helping as the program began to facilitate. And this obviously created a lot of pressure on us, but we were happy to take the challenge on. We ended up laying the groundwork for the capstone project, which was one that students selected in the beginning module, and they worked on over the whole 24 weeks. Things like the curriculum, which was separated into 12 modules, each with their own topics, instructors, teaching assistants, contingent guest speakers, etc. Things like the kickoff party, things like planning for streaming all of our classes online so that if people weren't necessarily in the program, they could still watch and learn with us, and so on. And things got more and more exciting as they also got busier. And we realized, kind of going into this, is that first week of classes zoomed by, that quite obviously there's always stuff that you can't plan for. And this might sound like an obvious thing for some people in this room, especially those who are more experienced than us, but kind of seeing this all come together, at least for me, was a big realization. We definitely knew this going in, and I think we just needed to kind of see it to make it real. So we couldn't plan for every single problem that our students would have in terms of getting their laptop set up or having one that didn't turn on correctly that first night. The family situation that would unfortunately result in one of our students having to leave the program. We couldn't plan for the intensity of the curriculum and how that affected them. We couldn't plan for the sheer amount of people who wanted to come in as guest speakers, and although it was fantastic, we really just couldn't fit them in our schedule, which was awesome. It's sort of a good problem to have. We couldn't plan for the structure of the capstone project and how our students would react to that in terms of having little structure versus more. I'll touch on that later. And I'll actually touch on all these later. But as a result, we were forced to adapt. And like in many other situations in life, that adaptation eventually helped us. We were forced to step outside of our comfort zone and to sort of expand our view on how we could solve complex problems. And the fact that we were actually able to do so was largely attributed to our feedback systems that had been in place since day one. And students would basically fill out feedback surveys after every single class. And they would also fill out feedback surveys after every week. They'd fill out feedback surveys quarterly, and on data required by the county. We'd have instructors fill out feedback surveys. We'd have TAs fill out feedback surveys. I can tell you, you probably fill out a million Google Forms between the start and end. And the Google Forms have not stopped, trust me. And a result of all this, we saw our students work through really complex problems, both in debugging their code and things such as family issues, friendship, professional hurdles. And really, I can't make this up, but one student's dog even ate her homework. So as somebody in high school, I've definitely tried to use that excuse before, but really seeing it happen was just like, wow. We were incredibly fortunate to see our local community embrace our students as a result, ultimately contributing to the really excellent education they were receiving here. And finally, we realized that what we were doing was really going to make an impact for these folks in the end. So finally, all of this culminated to August 22nd. It was a Thursday this past month on graduation. So our students showed their thanks by throwing a potluck that Monday before, kind of thanking the instructors and everyone who was involved. They wrote individualized notes to all the guest speakers, TAs, mentors, etc. And they finished up their capstone projects as the 22nd approached, ready to present them to a room of almost 100 eager technologists. And this was a really amazing night. Like I said, it really showed us the perspective of what we were doing, how powerful this was, and how impactful it was as well. Here are some photos from graduation. These folks, they were completely transformed, but still the same amazing people that we met back in March. They were definitely the most confident versions of themselves that night, and it was just really incredible to see that growth process throughout the entire thing. Last year, when I was a junior, I took a class called AP Language Composition, and it was basically leading up to this final exam where you write 4 essays in 2 hours. And our teacher had used this word called growth mindset. I never really understood what it meant until the end when I took the exam, and I was like, you really can't study to write 4 essays in 2 hours. But I think the same principle applies here. The growth mindset was so cool to finally see as these students graduate. And, looking forward and kind of seeing what they're doing now, a lot of them have been interviewing for technology positions, software development positions. And in fact, we've already had one student accept a job as a software developer at a local newspaper. So it's been really, really kind of cool to see that. More graduation photos here. So what happens next? It had been a really long and incredible journey for us. We were really excited about what was going to happen next. We've been incredibly busy. We kind of wanted to break. But of course, the work wasn't over. Now it was time to take a step back and really see what we had done well, what hadn't gone so well, and how we can make it better for next time. So we were constantly trying to ask ourselves this problem throughout the 24 weeks. Was our program successful? Did we achieve the goals that we had set out to accomplish? And ultimately, the answer is yes. Now, over the next few months, we are going to kind of set out to get the data to back that answer up. Placing data from our students, which is collected every 30 days, is going to be instrumental in sort of telling us what went well, like I said, what didn't go well, and how they're doing post-graduation. And looking at other setups like this and other boot camps, we're confident in our answer because 20,000 bootcamp graduates have gone through programs like this in 2018 alone, which is just a crazy number. Now, we had a 92% graduation rate, or 11 out of 12 students, and it really just kind of shows that we have the stuff to make this happen. And in general, the market growth is huge. We've already seen 9 times market growth in 2013. This shows that people are not only investing in graduates, but that the job market is there and it's growing. So what's the point of all this in the end? How are we improving the world around us, and how is Careers in Code contributing to our local community? Like I said, the community was such a large part of this that we really couldn't have done it without them. We wanted Careers in Code to be more than just an opportunity for the students, but also the community around them, either people who wouldn't necessarily be enrolled in the program, but still could go and look at classes that were streamed online, or community members that wanted to see the progress, get involved in the leadership process, maybe as an instructor or a mentor. And assimilation of the students to the community has been great. Many students have asked to come back as TAs and instructors and mentors in the next version of the program. The way we see it is that if half of our students enroll at entry-level positions in Syracuse, which is starting salaries around $45,000 to $50,000, so say 5 or 6 students, that's around $250,000 that immediately we're contributing back to the economy. But that number compounds over the next few years, right? So in 5-10 years, we're really making a substantial impact in our local community, which is just really cool to see. And there's a lot more to come on this part later in the presentation. As the mission of the bootcamp, being punted publicly, was centered around that economic revitalization piece, we've seen really large levels of success in building communities, both within, as we're all students, we're all friends now. It's been fantastic, but also outside of our community, kind of branching and building roots into Syracuse and other cities. At the end of the day, we stand by our original message. Syracuse, as well as maybe many other cities in New York and around the country, may have poverty problems, and we're trying to move the needle to fix that. So before I jump into our lessons learned piece, which is going to kind of tie back in everything I just talked about, I wanted to touch on this. So we're working on something called the Student Outcomes Report, which is basically a big culmination of all of our highly technical data. Things like placement rates, how many interviews people have gone through, job offers they've received, wealth creation, that sort of thing. And while it's not ready yet, we're prepared to release it very soon. So I'd encourage you to be on the lookout for that. If you're really interested in how these lessons learned have impacted on a technical basis, all the data is going to be there to show it. A lot of the stuff I'm about to talk about in the lessons learned piece is predicated on that data as it started to flow in over the past couple of weeks. So like I said, lessons learned, and I could go on all day about this. There's so many little tidbits of information that we've learned, including like where to plug in the webcam and how to arrange it in the best spot on the podium. But this is all going to be sort of on a high level basis to save time, obviously. And like I said, I really encourage you to check out that student outcomes report and eventually like a larger transparency report when you get a chance when that's released. So number one, you can't build a community without the community. While we did know that we wanted to involve the community going in, we really couldn't have anticipated the amazing impact they had in our students. I think you guys can all attest to that. We had experience doing this from Hack Upstate and building our events, and we wanted to expand on that network. Like I said before, the community was integral in doing so. We had many mentors, instructors, and teaching assistants who took time out of their busy schedules to come and work with us and help our students at night during class. Something to keep in mind about these people is that they were all invested in the community already. Many of them having full-time jobs, technologists, software developers, evangelists, people in communications and design, etc. They were coming after hours to work with our students, which was just great. Folks set up so many one-to-one sessions with students, just the student and the instructor helping them with either homework or a topic they maybe didn't understand in class, or working to help them finish their capstone projects. But beyond that, there was also a community at large that also really helped. We would attend local dev meetups in an effort to expose our students to the community. And we would have people who we didn't even know coming over to them and helping them kind of get coached and do this. Things like how to design a business card, how to make a LinkedIn profile, that sort of stuff that we weren't necessarily teaching, but that was still great in helping them kind of work towards that end goal, right? So for an example, the last week of class, we basically packed the tech garden with a bunch of mentors and instructors, both people outside of the program, people who had been teaching or maybe helping out beforehand, to help students finish their capstone project. And that was just great to see. It was just sort of like a little mini party. People coded and worked. It was great. And the lesson here is that there really wouldn't have been a Careers in Code without the amazing community that exists in Syracuse. We are forever grateful for them, and we know that going forward, we want to make sure they're more part of the process. For next time, we want to involve them in that process even more by doing specific curriculum development or having them work with our students or making sure that we're planning dev meetups into the calendar and so on. And going forward, students are already giving back to the community, and this just shows how important it is. Many have expressed interest in running and starting local startups. Our students have started Salt City Code, which a couple of you here, a local community podcast centered around the experience of the coding bootcamp grad. Many have continued to keep their involvement in local dev groups, building groups. I know Kelly wants to start like a coding book club, which I would just love to join. That sounds so much fun.
Oh, awesome.
So this is really great to see. And like I said, it just emphasizes the importance of community in this aspect. So our second lesson is to sort of talking about striking this learning balance when we're looking at our students, sort of between hand-holding and letting students go when working on our curriculum. We struggle with this, to be honest with you, mainly in a few components. One being the capstone project, like I said, that 24-week encapsulating project that students picked on their own. And they went through the process, kind of adding little tidbits of code and information as they learned the skills to do so. We had originally structured it so that we were hands-off. We wanted them to go through the development process on their own so that when they got out into the real world, they weren't completely lost. They were confident that they could build a project from scratch to deploy it by themselves. But in reality, these folks really hadn't seen code before, and we needed to make sure that they were on the right track. We didn't want them developing bad habits that might snowball later on. And we had a lot of students come up to us with these concerns, and with those feedback systems in place, we were able to make changes on the fly. Additionally, we had the curriculum, similar thing here. We had structured this without truly taking the time to think about how this would look from somebody's perspective who hadn't really seen code before. And although it really seemingly was in our mind the entire time, actually putting it into practice was a different story. And ultimately, it was incredibly successful. We saw students have a ton of knowledge after graduating. These guys know everything from like, front-end design to a little React, Node, all that stuff. So it really was great. But at the end of the day, we had a tremendous amount to cover. We wanted to make sure that we were making the best use of both their time as well as our instructors' time. Going forward for this particular lesson, we want to make sure that we are in full conversation with our students and staff to really examine how we want to best organize the curriculum. We want to involve the community more. We want to have the instructors be more specific in how to develop curriculum, that sort of thing. So third lesson, and sort of my last big one here, is that feedback from all groups is integral to the success of any program like this. And like I said, this is sort of the one that I've saved best for last. Pretty much everything that you've heard in this presentation is predicated on the massive amounts of data that we've received after this program has been completed, and also throughout it from all those millions of Google Forms that our students have filled out. And like I said, students have filled out forms daily, weekly, same with TAs and instructors. And as a result, we certainly wouldn't be where we are without that feedback. For any program of similar mission or size, it's impossible for a small team like us, only 3 or 4 people, to really see and hear everything that's going on the ground floor. These feedback systems and forums sort of acted as our eyes and ears on the ground. So when Jesse and I couldn't be in class, or when Jason couldn't be in class, or when Doug couldn't be in class, we had these systems in place to kind of track that for us, almost automated, although they were filling them out. And we had multiple situations where this feedback would ultimately result in on-the-fly changes to the program, whether that would be through multiple Zoom meetings late in the night or long Slack conversations. We were working in an iterative process, rather, to kind of make good changes to this program. For example, we ended up moving around the final weeks of the curriculum multiple times because we wanted to make sure that the tools being taught to our students were actually useful and relevant to their capstone projects. So seemingly, those 2 problems that we were having were actually more interconnected than we thought. And that's why we can't wait to do it all over again. All the lessons that we've learned in the past are sort of culminating into these big, lessons learned that we're hopefully looking forward to using. We, as of September 13th, have officially applied to send an RFP for the next round of funding from the Alliance for Economic Inclusion. We're really looking forward to kind of building this program, scaling it larger if everything goes to plan. And like I said, applying these lessons learned is really just going to be instrumental in doing so. So, like I said, the journey continues. This has been an amazing experience for everyone involved, especially for me, coming from like a different background, having never really done something like this before. It's been incredible seeing these students go from sort of 0 to hero in a span of 6 months, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like I said in the previous slide, the journey is really just beginning. We're really looking forward to kind of taking these lessons learned, applying them to our own programs, sharing them with the community, that sort of thing. I hope you're all really able to kind of take something away from this. There's a lot of information here that may seem like it's oddly specific, but really I think a lot of this stuff could also be applied to any sort of business model or that thing. And if there's one thing that I do want you to walk away with is that you can really do anything that you set your mind to, especially this. I know Jesse and I had originally talked back in like January, February, and I was thinking to myself, not really sure what this would look like in 6 months, but now that we're here, it's just kind of crazy to see that it actually happened, and really confident and excited about what's going to happen next. So thank you very much for listening. All my contact information is on here, and you guys enjoyed the talk. Thank you. Yeah, Jesse, you want to take that one?
Sorry, what's the question?
Like overall cost of the program.
Yes, $206,000 is what we applied for first RFP, and that's all that's right.
Yeah.
206.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You got another question?
Yes. Did they need any background in having a degree or being in education?
Nope. So, or you mean the instructors or the students?
The students.
Okay. So yeah. So we were actually looking for students. At the end, it really averaged out to like the 0 to 6 months of a coding experience. Like some of them had a lot more experience, whether it was using code at the previous job. Some of them really hadn't seen anything at all. So it was kind of actually interesting to see that process go through. We all stuck them in the same classroom. They were all at different stages, but they really ended up helping each other. Like the ones with more experience, although that was relatively small, maybe only a few months, they were able to help other people and kind of get everyone up to speed for school. But there was no requirement. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir. Awesome. Thank you guys. Yeah.